He knew from his own life that progress is fragile, that we have to be vigilant against the darker currents of this country's history, of our own history, with their whirlpools of violence and hatred and despair that can always rise again. Bull Connor may be gone, but today we witness with our own eyes police officers kneeling on the necks of black Americans. George Wallace may be gone, but we can witness our federal government sending agents to use tear gas and batons against peaceful demonstrators. We may no longer have to guess the number of jelly beans in a jar in order to cast a ballot. But even as we sit here, there are those in power who are doing their darndest to discourage people from voting by closing polling locations and targeting minorities and students with restrictive ID laws and attacking our voting rights with surgical precision, even undermining the Postal Service in the run-up to an election that's going to be dependent on mail-in ballots so people don't get sick. Now, I know this is a celebration of John's life. There are some who might say we shouldn't dwell on such things. But that's why I'm talking about it. John Lewis devoted his time on this earth fighting the very attacks on democracy and what's best in America that we're seeing circulate right now.
As if you needed any more proof of Trump's pettiness, you should know that during Obama's speech, Trump called an unscheduled press availability undoubtedly to draw attention away from Obama's eulogy of the late John Lewis. Why? Because Trump's entire life revolves around desperately trying to claw attention away from Obama. And yet that didn't stop the entire nation from listening to what President Obama had to say. And not only that, it reinforced his words exactly. Here we have Obama not at all parsing words and condemning, by name, the very elements of Trump's policies that fly in the face of John Lewis's legacy. He calls out Trump's use of federal forces to quell peaceful protests. It happened in Washington, D.C. when Trump wanted to get a photo op in front of St. John's Episcopal Church, and so federal forces tear gas peaceful protesters, people exercising their First Amendment rights, all so that Trump could do this.
Save my...
What are your thoughts right now?
White House.
Yeah, worth it. It then happened again in Portland, a move that Trump took specifically because he needed to lend credence to the talking point that Democratic-run cities are dangerous. To be clear, the reason there is violence in Portland is against the federal troops that have come in. That is why the violence is occurring, and Trump knows that. He knows that until they're gone, the violence will continue, and so he's purposefully leaving them there as long as possible because he thinks the optics will help his re-election. Because remember, it's always about him and his political fortunes. Trump has also announced that he'll send federal troops into other cities now too, namely Milwaukee, Cleveland, and Detroit. Now I wonder what three major cities in the states of Wisconsin, Ohio, and Michigan have in common. Could it have something to do with the fact that they're all swing states that have major implications for the upcoming November election? No, it couldn't possibly be that. Obama even invokes police officers kneeling on the necks of black Americans, significant still because Trump has positioned himself on the side of police officers. He's tweeted ad nauseum his support for the cops and went even further by targeting BLM protesters for federal prosecutions that carry decade-long prison sentences. In other words, on the issue of police brutality, Trump is making it crystal clear which side of the issue he's on. And finally, President Obama discusses this administration's efforts to make voting more difficult for people, a practice that John Lewis specifically dedicated his life fighting against. He talks about closing polling locations. Since Republicans gutted the Voting Rights Act, a staggering 1,200 polling locations have been closed across the South. overwhelmingly in minority-majority areas. And in case there's any doubt, the purpose of that is to make it harder for people more likely to vote for Democrats to cast ballots. Obama talks about targeting minorities and students with restrictive ID laws, which has been again put into practice by Republicans. In places like Texas, the GOP is enacting major roadblocks to voting by eliminating polling places on campuses, as students are now supporting Democrats over Republicans by vast margins. Trump has even targeted the post office itself, installing one of his donors as Postmaster General, who immediately got to work undermining the efficacy of the agency by eliminating overtime for employees and creating massive delays. Delays that are designed to undermine Americans' ability to vote by mail. The insidiousness isn't a bug, it's a feature. What Trump is doing is obvious, it's egregious, and it flies directly in the face of what this country is supposed to represent, which is why Obama deserves all the credit in the world for calling him out for it. If not by name, by listing off every single one of the vile and un-American practices he's put into place. Maybe that's why Trump didn't want anyone to hear what Obama had to say, and for good reason. And don't forget to listen to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I'll take a deep dive into the biggest issues of the week and interview major players in the world of politics, like Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Beto O'Rourke, Eric Swalwell, Katie Porter, and many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.